year. And as I thought about all of the conversations that have taken place in the last 6 weeks, um, I felt like it would be good to start having a regular time when I can update you on some of those things, but also seek input as we make plans for the future, because things are going to be very different next year than in a normal year. And even though faculty are on, many of you are on a 9-month contract, I felt like you would probably be interested in hearing the plans that we're making for next year and having a chance to provide input. And that's really what most of this meeting will be about. I'm going to provide just a few updates, but for the most part, I'm going to ask questions, and I'd like you to plan to jump in there and participate and give us input and feedback, because there are a lot of big decisions that have to be made for next year. One thing that you might not realize is how you've been working extra hard to get your classes done and do the things that you're doing. But on the dean's end of things, we've worked harder than I've ever been a part of a dean's group over the last 3 months. And usually we take a little break when summer starts. We've just been hitting it full forces, doing a lot of planning and talking and praying and thinking. So a lot of the questions that I'll ask you, we've talked about a lot, but instead of telling you what we've talked about, I'd rather listen to your response and see how well that aligns with what we've talked about. And then my plan would be to have these meetings about 3 or 4 times this summer, to come back in a couple of weeks and kind of update you on where we're at, get some more input. We'll record these meetings, so if you're on vacation, you can watch it later. I just want to try to provide as much information and get as much opportunity for input as we can at this critical time. Just a few quick updates before we get into hopefully some good conversations. For the spring 2020, we do have a lot of good feedback from the students from their end of semester evaluations, and we're going through the comments and trying to anonymize those and also build some themes and things. We're very close. I think this week we'll be able to send out a summary of all that to you so that you'll be able to see the feedback that we got from the students. You might have seen some of the posts recently that indicate the students overwhelmingly were positive about you and about the faculty and the job that they did and their availability and the help that they provided. So there's a lot of good feedback from the students, and the comments I think will be useful for you to look through and see those comments. In terms of the academic standing process, we did get all of the credit, low credit, no credits processed, which was a big process, and Todd Martin and his team deserve props for going the extra mile there. But there was more than 1,000 submissions on that when you count multiple courses for some students. So a lot of records got touched. And the way that we're handling those is anybody who was put on probation or warning or suspended, we're going back and we're reevaluating their academic standing based on the new GPA with the new grade. And so that can benefit the student. A lot of students, instead of probation, are on warning, for example. That was one of the biggest changes that we saw. We did not change the dean's list standing based on this. We felt like the grade that they earned without the credit, no credit, should determine whether or not they're on the dean's list. And so that's how we were handling that. And we're processing those now and getting ready to send those out. The summer feedback that I've been receiving, which is not a lot, but just, in talking to students, asking questions, and also just emails that come in unprovoked, have been pretty positive about the summer. A lot of students have talked about how they appreciate how much they can tell the faculty spent more time organizing the class than they saw in the spring. And of course, they acknowledge in the spring we just had to go online. They could tell a difference, is what I'm hearing. In the summer, the classes are better organized. It's easier for the students to follow what's going on and find things. So I think that we're receiving some good positive feedback on that. Enrollment for fall of 2020 continues to look very promising. The retention numbers look good. Our students want to come back, and they're telling us that. But I will tell you that we're getting a lot of questions from students, what if I'm not able to come back? Can I still take my classes? Can I still stay a Harding student? And it's questions like that that I want to follow up with you in the question period. What does this look like if we have a student who, for some reason, possibly because of family situation or maybe their own health problems, if they decide I need to take the fall off, I'll come back in the spring, what can we do? And those are the kinds of questions to think about. But right now, the retention looks very promising. Our students want to be back with us. And honestly, the new student numbers are promising as well. The problem is they don't have the same level of attachment to us and the Harding community. And so we don't know what the melt's going to be. But I want to give you an example. We have over 700 students already in their fall classes, new students. Normally, we would have about 100 right now because normally we wouldn't have even had Bison Bound 1 yet. So you might have noticed if you've tried to advise somebody in the last few days, the classes are filling up. So that's a good problem to have. And I think it was really brilliant for the first year experience working with admissions to come up with this strategy to get them registered for classes, to get them excited about coming. And I know you had to do a lot of extra work to make that happen. And I appreciate that. We continue to have students that haven't ever responded. At some point, we're going to just put them in classes and continue to try to get them to respond. But we think it's important to get all of them registered for classes. In terms of planning for next year, just a quick update. The task force for reopening meets every week. And they talk about everything from how we're going to test for COVID-19, what the strategy is going to be. What do you do if you have to quarantine somebody? We're talking about, do we have a dorm or a wing of a dorm that's dedicated for quarantine space? Do we change how we're doing housing? How do we keep our staff and faculty safe? I mean, everything that's related to us reopening, not only in the fall, but this summer, we're talking about those things in that task force. I'm super impressed with that group, which includes local doctors, as well as government, national and state government-related folks. We're getting a lot of good input on that. And so we are talking a lot about that. If you have specific concerns that you have about reopening, I would say you could email those to me or to Dr. Hickson Wallace. We're both on that task force. But the doctors and state officials and national officials are bringing things up proactively and giving us up-to-date information about where things are and where they think things will be. Obviously, we want to bring our students back in a way that's as safe as it can possibly be for them and for us and for the whole community. And so we're getting a lot of good progress there on plans for the fall. I don't have specifics on that, but I'll try to get some more specifics on that for you for a future meeting. The deans have really been, once we've decided that we're going to open on time, our plan is start on time, on ground, and the students don't come back after Thanksgiving, they finish from home. We had to make that decision so we can begin to make all of the detailed decisions. And so that's really what this meeting is a lot about, for you to think and talk with us about what does that look like for the fall? How do we plan to cover our classes and all? The deans have had a lot of conversations, and we have shared Google Docs, and we're putting a lot of ideas together about how do we do this. But again, I want you to talk before you hear the things that we've talked about, because I don't want to bias your thoughts and your opinions. I want to hear what you have to say on that. One of the things that we're doing right now, the deans have been given a Google Doc, access to a Google Doc that has every classroom and the current capacity in a normal semester. And then there's a column called COVID-19 capacity. And we're going room to room, trying to figure out if we keep people 6 feet apart and the instructor is 12 feet away from the closest student, how many people can we fit in that room? And you can imagine the scheduling problem that we're going to have to try to meet those requirements. And what we're going to find is we have a lot of classes for medium-sized sections. And those classrooms are going to become for small sections for the fall. So we're going to have to move our medium-sized classes into the large classrooms, and we have to find ways to do our large classrooms And we're trying to think outside the box about different spaces, you know, using auditoriums, using the roads, using outdoor spaces. We could possibly get tents. There's different things we could do. So think outside the box with me when we talk about this in a little bit. What are some of your ideas there? One thing that is obvious to me that I want to just say before we begin the conversation is going into the fall, and this is why we need to talk about this so early in the summer. We need to be planning to be online at a moment's notice. We can't get caught off guard in the spring like we did when we had to send everybody home. There's a possibility we won't start on ground on the first day. And so we need to plan from the very beginning. We might have to bring them in later than we hope. We might have to send them home before Thanksgiving. In the middle of the semester, you might have 10 of your students that get quarantined because one of them tests positive and they were studying together. You know, there's all sorts of scenarios that will require us on a moment's notice to accommodate our students who can't come to the classroom. I don't know a better way to say that. So those are the kinds of things that we need to think about as we plan for the fall. I think what that does mean, sort of in my mind, as a minimum expectation, is we need our classes to already be online in Canvas. You know, we need to have that information already available, and we need some minimum standards for that. What does that look like? Quality Matters Light was something that was developed with faculty input to try to address that. What's the minimum standard? What should be there to ensure quality and ensure the students can find the stuff that they need? So without saying any more to potentially bias what your feedback might be, I really want to get into asking some questions and letting you provide answers. And we are recording this, not to keep you from saying anything, but we're recording this so your colleagues can watch it as well. We want everybody to be able to watch this and potentially provide input. So the first question I would ask is, what are you hearing from students? Whether it's about the spring or the summer if you're teaching right now, or maybe more importantly about the fall, but what are you hearing from students that would be important for us to know? And so I'll open it up, and I'm going to be real patient and wait for people to talk. And you can either hit the space bar to unmute yourself or click on the unmute button. Who will be first?
I'll jump in, Marty.
Thanks, John.
One of the things I consistently hear from students and faculty is they want to know. They want answers. They want to know what's going on. So communication is critical. I know you don't always know what the answer is, and you guys are meeting weekly to make decisions, but as much as we possibly can, we need to have everybody from the bottom up as knowledgeable as we possibly can.
Good.
Marty, in the chat box, Trixie says from students, they're saying there's no point in paying for Harding classes if they're online.
That's a great point. And I don't know if y'all are reading any of the higher ed online articles, like in the Chronicle and other places. But one of the things that's clear is the expectation for the fall is not going to be the same as the spring. You know, we got a lot of grace from them in the spring, and we showed a lot of grace. But for the fall, students say they're not going to keep paying high tuition rates if they don't get the same experience that they're expecting in on ground. And so the bar is going to be raised. So that's really important for us to think about.
And Jake also asked if when commencement will take place in the fall. I guess students are asking that.
The plan for the fall at this point is, obviously August 15th is the plan to have commencement before the school year starts for the May and the summer graduates. But we can't really say for sure what's going to happen in December. Obviously, we're sending the students home and not bringing them back after Thanksgiving. And one of the ideas is to not bring people into our community from all over the world if the pandemic is raging again. in the winter. So it really is going to depend on how things are going. And I don't know. I will tell you that I would lean towards we can't keep canceling or delaying. At some point, we're going to have to figure out how to do something virtually. So I don't know what'll happen. That's something that could possibly happen in August as well. We might have to figure out to do something small and make it virtual as well. But there are no answers to those questions yet. But our goal would be to make a decision as fast as possible so we can let people know.
In the chat box also, my intercession students thought the process went well. One said it felt similar to when he was in the classroom with me. I only had 3, but they were all positive about the class at the end. And another question, what will chapel look like from the students? That's
a great question. And Dr. McClarty says, if we're worried about that, we're way ahead of where he thinks we might be. In other words, chapel's going to look different. And Dr. McClarty is very open to different models on that. We realistically know we're not going to have everybody in the Benson on the first day of class to hold chapel. I mean, we'd have to have a miracle for that to happen. And I believe in miracles and I'm praying for it. But we know that chapel's going to have to look different. And that's something we need to talk about, whether it's virtual or whether we have it broken into smaller groups. But chapel will look different.
One thing that I noticed from feedback from several students, and I guess I see students on several levels. I see some that are very knowledgeable, but I also have some that struggle. They felt like the presentations that were done were good. However, they had a hard time feeling like they got good quality feedback. And that's not towards any one department, anything like that, truly not. But they just appreciated the being able to go into the office, the virtual, or just being able to go tutoring, asking questions, more personal. And again, I know we're looking at a new era. I think we may just need to work on, and I include myself in this, how we can make sure that truly office visits are that one-on-one. How can we personalize them through it on screen? The second thing that I got from students was they want to make sure that, even high stakes exams are done online and monitored and proctored. They feel like they need to have that feedback about what specific exam questions did I miss. I know this may be a departmental issue, but for some of these students, these small little particulars matter more than other students who just tell me the concepts, tell me the things, I'll look it up on my own, get the feedback there. So, I kind of see 2 different levels of students that one could really excel, do great with feedback. Others need that little bit more guidance.
Thanks, Greg.
Also in the chat box, Eric Colgrove is asking, where are we with providing professional development for online teaching? And then Melanie Meeker is mentioning that she's had several students tell me about the significant challenges they face with online learning in the spring, and they're very anxious about the online portion of the fall semester and would love to be finished at Thanksgiving. So one about professional development for faculty and one about student concern about finishing after Thanksgiving.
That's great. We are going to roll out more Quality Matters Light training, and we're figuring out how to do that. But our anticipation is every faculty member would have the opportunity to complete that training as well as additional training this summer or right before school starts. Our approach would be, you're a 9-month faculty, and so we can't expect that you would do this in the summer unless you want to do this proactively, but we can provide it and we can record it, so you can either attend or you can watch it. And we can also provide some things right before the semester begins. I am concerned if we wait to do everything right before the semester begins, there won't be time for all the faculty to do what they need to do, which is why we need to start on that right away. And I would push Melanie's comments back as a question. What are some ideas for what to do with those weeks after Thanksgiving? In other words, can we rethink our classes and do something different, sort of take a hybrid approach. What would you do with those 2 weeks after Thanksgiving so that we could take advantage of knowing in advance that's going to be online and do the things face to face that we think really need to be done face to face. Do any of you already have ideas what you might do to make changes after Thanksgiving to what you do?
Am I logged in?
Yes.
Actually, not specific to Thanksgiving, but as you know, in the physical therapy program and the other medical programs as well, we're having to make up for the lost clinical time, plus complete the didactic, plus get ready for the summer clinical time, and then be ready to go in the fall, and then think about what we're going to do if all that falls apart. So it's an interesting mix. So one of the things that we are already looking at is trying to create exactly what you're discussing, is a hybrid scenario where what we did this summer is we pushed everything into a time frame that our course was essentially done by July 1st. All of our courses were done by July 1st, with the exception of the clinic scenarios. And then we use that remaining time to do makeup for what we missed in the spring. So we have all that interpolated into that window of time saved. So I think certainly that kind of thing can be done. And that's what we've done for the summer, and we'll probably try to do something similar for the fall, pending what happens with that. I would like to make one other comment. As you know, Marty, I came back from the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, which is, has a complete online division. They even have all of their medical sciences offered in hybrid. So they only meet on weekends. The rest of everything that is done is online. And what we found was that once students got acclimated to that, it seemed to work pretty well. Right now we have kind of the mix that was echoed earlier. We have about half of our students seem to be doing better online than they were doing in the classroom, and we have about half of our students that are really struggling online. But I think as we explore and break in the students to this new paradigm, I think they'll do fairly well as long as we can put it together and make it clear and communicate exactly what we're doing and why we're doing, and I think it'll work. But that's what our plan has been for the summer so far. It's worked, and I think we'll probably do something similar in the fall with that extra time to make it all fit together.
I noticed in the comments that someone chatted they were going to restructure how their exams were scheduled. If you give an exam during that last week, maybe you can restructure and give that before they go home. Same thing, and another comment was anatomy and physiology was going to have a project move to when they're gone for the semester, working from afar. One of the things we did talk about compressing the semester and being done by Thanksgiving, but that becomes pretty problematic in some types of classes. And realistically, there's a chance that we're going to have to send them home before Thanksgiving. And so if you've compressed the schedule and you end up sending them home, the plan that we have put out is the most flexible plan in terms of being able to accommodate any situation that would happen. And I think that's why that decision was made. Any other comments on that?
There's also a comment here, follow up to restructuring exams, meaning move them outside of class and thereby regain days in the classroom before Thanksgiving for more instruction of content. If they take, while they're still here on ground, take their exams, but take them outside of class instead of using class time to review and administer the exam, move that to outside. But then there was also a comment from Christy saying, can't we can't all crunch 2 extra weeks of material into the week before Thanksgiving or we'll overwhelm the students. So sometimes
Absolutely.
the content is more difficult for
So
that
that's
format.
a good point. We need to think about, you can give exams not in the testing center online outside of class yourself. There's different ways to do that. And so we need to explore some possibilities so more people could give exams outside of class.
And
We are canceling fall break, and that's going to be a day gained back, a Friday gained back, which wouldn't have to be after Thanksgiving. It would be before Thanksgiving. So that's one day gained.
There's questions about the testing lab. Will it be refitted? And then I guess the email that was sent last week related to that about proctoring exams.
yes,
That's a good question about the testing.
proctoria.
What did you say, Marty?
I said that's a great question. I was just typing that down. I don't know about plan changes, but obviously we need to be COVID-19 compliant in the testing lab. So. I guess I might shift gears a little bit and ask, have you thought about how we can manage the fall with smaller classrooms? If all of our classes can only accommodate half as many students, or maybe even fewer than half, in our classes that have rigid desks or tables where you can't move them around, we might be at 1/3 of capacity for the fall. So have you thought some about how you might, for example, reorganize your class to make that work in a smaller classroom, or how we might go about accomplishing the rescheduling? What thoughts do you have?
Marty, I have a kind of a question and a comment about that. My general biology class was completely online for intersession.
Yeah.
And I had basic 48 students. And so that's almost exactly what I have in the fall in 2 sections of 50 each right now. And so what I'm wondering is that online course, I can give it almost exactly as it is, and then use the normal class time instead of having them sit in the room 3 days a week, have 1/3 of them in the room 1 day a week for the, on face-to-face question and answering and that, and then we can fit in the same size room. And it just depends on how much leeway we can have in restructuring the attendance policy, as long as our students, are getting what they need.
That's a great question. And that's something we need to think about. Can our classes look different for the fall? Can we have larger components online and use the classroom for smaller interactions? I think that's a great idea we need to explore.
Can you talk a little bit more about the attendance policy?
Yeah.
Is that a problem if they wish to change the attendance policy in a class?
Yeah, I think that's an area where we're going to have to be accommodating. For example, it could be that, building off of what Steve had suggested, what if you had half the class attend virtually every other day, every other class period? So they were alternating. So half the class came and half the class watched Zoom, or they watched Echo 360, and then they flip-flopped back and forth. Can we treat that as attending as long as they watch the video? Can we adjust our attendance policies basically to accommodate some of these strategies?
And another question I heard in there from Steve was about flexibility. Maybe I read that into your question, but by all means, we're going to have to be flexible. I can't imagine that your class, and I see Melanie Meeker right there beside you, everyone's going to have flexibility to do a lot of these things differently. There will be some areas we discuss later where we may want, as a faculty, to say, we all need to do this consistently for the sake of students not getting mad that one person did it one way and one another. But for things like you just recommended, at least it's my opinion, we're going to have a lot of flexibility in that.
There's some other questions. Well, one thing Paula Kirby has mentioned to everyone, that e-learning plans to, or IS&T plans to anticipate adding hours to the testing lab in order to have smaller numbers in the lab. So they are looking at refitting in that sense. How about something about Thanksgiving break? Kim Lang is mentioning that she's heard talk that we will stay until Tuesday before Thanksgiving, like the old days, rather than having the whole week, the students having the whole week off, or I guess leaving the Friday before the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's an option that we could take advantage of. At this time, the statement was pretty general. We haven't talked through that level of detail. We didn't talk about extending the time before they left. I think that's something possible we could look at.
And then some mention about engaging students in active learning. How do you do that when they're 6 feet apart? With a response from Trixie saying you can use audience response systems to help with things like that. But then also a question for instruction that requires the student and faculty to sometimes be closer than 6 feet, such as in a lab or an art studio. Are we going to be allowed to do that, be closer than 6 feet if we're both wearing a mask?
Yeah,
And will there be a fall break came up again, which I believe you have mentioned that there won't be a fall break.
and these are the types of things, a question about the face-to-face and this close interactions that the task force is talking about, and I expect them to have some recommendations based on medical information and information coming from the government, both national and state, as well as the CDC. You know, we're going to follow the guidelines that the government's providing, and that our healthcare consultants or participants are providing. But the task force is going to, I'm sure, have recommendations on that. One thing that is coming up now is face shields, and the potential for using face shields. I think that could be a difference maker that could help us out a lot in certain scenarios because it protects the whole face, including the eyes.
Relating to the thought about staying until Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, there was a comment from Brittany Blake that could be expensive for students who have to fly home. If they have to stay later, the flights may be more expensive. And then again, will there be fall break? And I believe you said the answer to that is no,
Yeah.
there will not be fall break.
Fall break was canceled.
Jean is asking, Jean Waldrop from the library, I'd like to know if there were any issues or complaints from students about not being able to get resources that they needed from the library. So basically wanting some feedback from everyone on what you heard about library service access in recent times. And then there's a question about testing microphones for use under masks. We need to identify them and purchase them soon. And I think related to microphones, we have been thinking, we would provide microphones if that's necessary, but you can take your mask off. That's if you maintain a big enough distance or have a face shield so that you wouldn't have to use a microphone with a mask, but we can certainly look into all those possibilities. And then equipping classrooms with video cams. So
a lot of questions. One person mentioned splitting large sections into two. You know, that's something to think about. If your area has large sections, how do you handle those? I mean, you kind of hear different strategies. One would be, especially if you have multiple sections at that time, combining them all into a large section, put them in an auditorium, and then do small breakout groups, kind of like Steve talked about earlier for the class time. But would a faculty member prefer to take a large class and break it into two sections? And potentially that would take them to 27 hours instead of 24, and maybe they don't have to hold as many office hours or something like that. Are there some strategies? We need to think about those large sections and how can we manage those?
does anyone have any comments about the library or Jean? Any feedback?
This
Something.
is Jean. I was just curious because we did not mail out physical items. So if a student needed a book, an actual physical book, we were not mailing those out. So I didn't know if that impacted them during the online classes. I'm a little bit worried because we haven't got a lot of the books back. And so we're trying to do that. And with us leaving at Thanksgiving, if there's 2 weeks after that, and let's say they've got research projects or papers due, they might still need those physical books. And so that's kind of a little bit of an issue. We don't know what we're going to do about that. Some of the students said they're going to bring the books back in August, so we hope we get those back. And of course, we don't know what the library's going to look like if we have to spread everybody out. We usually have about 10,000 students that come through a week, and so that's going to really cut that down. And I don't know what that'll do to the students either, but it's something to think about.
Jean, with the free textbook, online textbook service that y'all provided this summer, is that going to be also provided for the fall? We had someone asking about that.
That was really through the bookstore and the publishers were
Okay.
very open to letting us do that because our students had purchased the books, but they were left here on campus. So we're really going back to original copyright if the student needs to purchase the book if they're going to be in a class. So that's kind of how that goes. But if there are available in unlimited access for us to purchase, then we will do that with our budget. And it has been very reasonable. I think we maybe spent maybe a little bit over $2,000, maybe $3,000 on some online resources like that. And I felt that was pretty good because they weren't much more than what it would be for us to buy a physical book. So if you need that, yes, please let us know so we can get those purchased.
And we can also, David Hall had done training a couple of weeks ago about the HU Direct Access. It's not free online textbooks, but the service that we have available, if you choose an online textbook, that the students can have that put directly on their bill, and it's much less expensive in most cases. And so we can have David do some more training on those. And our bookstore individuals, David and Tracy, I believe, is the other person involved in that, have done a fabulous job of getting titles for our university. And in fact, we're like number 2 or number 3 in the country of having the largest number of titles available through that service, even compared to like the University of Arizona. I think we have more textbooks available through HU Direct Access than they have at some very large universities. So if you have a textbook, contact David Hall also about through HU Direct Access, and they can start working on trying to make that available through that process as well.
You read my mind, Julie, and I talked to David. Yes, we emailed on Friday, but the deadline for that decision is probably this week, because they're ordering textbooks, and once they order the physical textbooks, then they're not going to be able to make that switch. He did also mention that they probably won't do rentals like they normally do because of the problem of getting them to return them on time if they're going home at Thanksgiving. So the options will be a little bit fewer for the students. But we do have an increased number of faculty using HU Direct Access for the fall. So I was glad to see that.
Paula has mentioned that CTNL is preparing to set up microphones and speakers for outside classrooms. So they are working on technology for outdoor classrooms in answer to Lori's question. The equipping podium computers with video cams, I think that's something else that e-learning is working on as well.
What about specific support related to giving finals via distance? You know, are there specific things that would have been helpful to you in giving that and in planning for the fall? Is there some type of support that you need if you're going to give your final from afar.
And while everyone's thinking about that one, there was a question asked a second ago about the plan for when certain decisions will be made about students in masks and policies. Because I guess some departments, as they should be, are trying to make decisions, but they're not sure what's going to be mandated versus what decisions are in their court. So I think the question in general is looking for a time frame on when strict policies will be passed down versus what faculty and departments should be deciding on their own. Do you have a crystal ball for that one?
From the standpoint of, we could give dates and we could say times, but just like we've all seen, the CDC changes their mind or their guidelines change 2 days after that, then there's nothing that we can do about that. But I mean, I think, I don't know, Marty, if you've got any dates to say. I mean, we could tell you today kind of the guidance that's gone out as far as we expect masks to be required all the time on campus, anytime
Right.
You're in close contact, less anything even with 6 feet, but less than 6 feet certainly. But what the exceptions to those rules are, I think, are things we're still working through. And
I know that July 1 is a date that the president has mentioned when we hope to be able to announce a lot more than we've already announced. And so that might be a time when we can shoot for from academics by then to know more specifics on our side of things, which is why we really need to gather information right now to help inform those decisions.
question in here too about, are we thinking about time, extra time between course periods, especially if students are having to travel? This is to off-site classrooms, but I would think even outside classrooms that might be further spread on campus than what's normal. And then portable whiteboards for outside use. And then also technology that students need to use to give presentations, such as projectors and screens, etc. Going back to technology in the classroom for outside classes. So not just the microphones, but also presentation technology.
I'm taking notes on all of these things. Talk a little bit about how you see yourself managing your class so that you're able to accommodate online at a moment's notice, or a student not being able to attend at a moment's notice, however you want to frame that. You know, what if you have a group of students that gets quarantined, or what if we have to send the students home on October the 3rd instead of Thanksgiving? You know, so what are some of the things that you've thought about so that you're thinking about so that you're ready to do that? Maybe let's start with the quarantine thing. You know, what if you have students that we're going to have more than the normal number of students that are gone for 3 weeks, or, you know, how, you know, we deal with that normally some because of mono and different things that happen to students, or surgery. But we could have students in every class on campus that are literally having to stay in the dorm or stay away for 2 or 3 weeks or more.
Hey, Marty. I probably no different than a lot of faculty. This last spring, I recorded most of my lectures in the classroom. I went to my classroom that I typically used. I set up a little tripod. I put my iPhone up there. I turned on the screen just like the students were in front of me, and I just recorded my lecture. Of course, I got no feedback from the students because nobody was there, but I recorded it. I saved it to my G Drive, took it from my G Drive to YouTube, took it from YouTube, loaded the link into Canvas, and then they could just watch my lecture just as if they were sitting in my classroom. I'm sure many faculty did that. And I realize that's easier to do in some disciplines than others. You can't do that necessarily with teaching calculus. I know Debbie Duke and I have talked about this. It's harder to do in some subjects, but having said that, that is my plan moving forward. If I have 5 students in a class that get COVID and they have to be in a dorm, I mean, I have 2 classes I taught in the spring that I will teach again in the fall, and I already have those videos prepared, and I can just load those for them. Or if it's a class that I didn't have in the spring, I'll just have to do a lecture. I feel like it is extra work for the faculty, but and anybody, we're all intelligent people, but if you're timid about loading it to YouTube, and so it's a very simple process. It does take some learning, but it's a very simple process. And like I said, I think many of you have already done that, but that is what I intend to do.
Others?
Marty, I do have a question about how to expand that. We did that, created all our own online lectures for the physical therapy group so that, we would be able to accommodate any changes, and we're going to try to do that same thing for the fall. But one of the problems that I ran into in this first round was I tried to A, make everything available on Echo, but B, also load it as a download into Canvas. And what my students were doing in some cases where they didn't have immediate internet access, of course, is just taking those off of Canvas and being able to use them from there. But the quality of that download is not nearly as good as Echo. And I interpolate a lot of imagery and YouTube videos and that sort of thing. And so the quality was just not good. I contacted our IT guys about it. They said there's an automatic default in the Canvas system that takes the pixels down and reduces the quality. I would really like to have that option to put that there for both mechanisms. We had students that, for instance, when they went home, they were going over to Mississippi, and some areas of Mississippi and different rural areas that they didn't have internet access. They didn't have it at home, and they were having to commute back and sit in the parking lot and pick up the Echo lectures. Panera's wasn't open, McDonald's wasn't open, so they didn't have any other access. So if we could have that to where we could download a high quality version of it in Canvas simultaneous to the Echo, that wouldn't require that they be on the internet full time, where they could just take it, download it, and walk away with it. I think that would be useful if we find ourselves in another scenario with students away from campus again.
That's good.
Marty, did you get a sense of what percentage of our students faced the kind of challenges that Doug is describing? I heard it, from some, but I was wondering what that was like across campus. That may be a hard question.
Yeah, I don't have
on the
that.
surveys we got back, there were students who said that, but I would say that came from less than 50 students that made that comment. There may be more who had that exact issue, but it's hard to read from the survey if that actually applied to more people or not.
Yeah.
One question, kind of on a slightly different topic, but that was asked: is there a plan to provide face masks and hand sanitizer for each of the students and faculty? And I know Tammy Hall has mentioned at least a couple of times that, we have put hand sanitizer stations are being installed in buildings near the exits, entrances and exits of all buildings. So there will be hand sanitizer in that form, but not individually providing it to everyone based on the CDC guidelines about hand washing and that being the preferred mechanism. They have said that we don't plan to provide hand sanitizer for every single student. And I believe the emails that went out about the face coverings are basically stating you will need a face covering, add it to your list of things to bring to school when you come this fall, as far as for faculty and staff. I'm sure if someone had, for some reason, inability to obtain that arrangements could be made, but just doing it as a standard across the board, from what I understand, there's not a plan to provide those just automatically.
What question should I be asking that I didn't ask? I mean, is there something that you need to tell me? I didn't ask the right question.
I had a question, Marty. I don't really know the answer to, but it sounds like all the requirements for COVID would like cut classroom capacity in about half or something like that to protect the students and the teachers. But how does that translate into their living quarters? Because they're going to be, I mean, if it's not across the board, I don't see how it would work to do that just in the classroom or chapel. So just out of curiosity, how are you maintaining 6 feet? And I mean, they can't wear masks 24/7. So how does that work when they're living with each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at, and student life and housing are on just the front end of this, but thinking about how we're going to do housing, we do have a lot of extra capacity right now that we didn't have 5 years ago, which on one hand is not a good thing, but on the other hand, it gives us some flexibility for planning right now. For example, Kindle was going to be taken off, but we're going to have Kindle ready to be a dorm, and it might be the quarantine dorm. I don't know where we're going to land on that. But we also got apartment buildings. We completely cleared out the village of the guys, and so we have all those apartments over there. So I think we're going to have more options for people to be single room instead of people that have risks and are afraid to have a roommate can do that. And obviously all the interactions that take place during the day, like in the CAF and the student center, different places, we're going to have to think about all of that. I'm not a health care provider, but my understanding is that there's a viral load issue. The longer you spend around someone that has the viral in close proximity. So obviously we're going to have to closely watch, and that's where the testing comes in. We need to know if somebody tests positive. And I think we'll have tracing strategies that we have to follow. Dr. Hickson Wallace could speak more to this than me as a healthcare person, but we're going to have the ability very quickly, if somebody tests positive, to quarantine their roommate, to also find out who they've been around a lot. I really honestly believe that for most of our students, they're going to be safer on our campus than they would be at home if we do our jobs and do it right. But there is going to be some risk. And if you have a roommate, you're going to be living in close proximity, so that is a risk. It's riskier, but I think we're also going to have to do a lot of training with our students on appropriate protection that they need to take and how to live with a group of other students. One of the big things that we're going to have to change our culture on is pushing forward when you're sick. When you're sick, you need to go to the nurse and you need to get checked out. And if it's not COVID-19, then that's one thing. But if there's a chance that it is, then we can't just push through like many of us do all the time. So we're really going to have to do some training and some culture changing, just like the face mask wearing. I hate wearing a face mask. I like to smile at people. I like to see their facial expressions. And so I have to constantly remind myself I'm doing that because I love them, not because, I don't really feel like it's protecting me that much, but I love them. And that's the way that I keep thinking of this. I think the faculty need to help the students understand that they're going to be less likely to want to be in compliance. I think more mature adults, we understand the importance of community compliance. So we really need to be positive about a lot of these changes, even though we personally really don't like it. And that's where I'm at. And I know, my wife has an autoimmune condition, which makes me think about this a lot. because I'm thinking about, I love my wife, and so I'm going to wear a mask and I'm going to do certain things that I don't want to do.
On that note, we will also have faculty in the same situation that it may not be best for them to come to campus and be teaching class. The earlier we know that, and that, in whatever way we need to assist, please communicate with us. You may be taking care of that through your department, but obviously we understand that, and we'll have to make arrangements, right? So please communicate that. We are aware that that's the case.
I wanted to respond to Laurie Dowles' question about who's determining how we use our classrooms, the provost office or the department. And that's a great question. And honestly, for the last 3 months, we've worked closely with the deans, and we've tried to let the deans drive the decision making as much as possible, and in particular have control over their areas. And in looking at how to use the rooms, we want the colleges to have as much input as possible. But at the end of the day, I don't think any college is going to be able to solve their problem alone. So we're going to have to put all the data onto the table and figure out how we can work together to help each other, because I think every college is going to have some classes that don't have a room that will hold them. But I think the strategy would be to try as much as possible to let the college and the department to figure out how best to solve their problem, and then work together, all the deans together, to try to make it work as a university. That's kind of my thoughts on the approach. Is there other stuff in the chat that I hadn't seen yet?
Questions on here regarding testing. How much testing will we have? What type of testing? How often will we be tested? And related to that, how will we do contact tracing? The testing discussion is one that we're having every week in the reopening task force. And I can tell you from week to week, one week, the guidance will be, oh, antigen testing is the way to go. And the next week, nope, we don't want to do antigen testing. And then we're back to, yes, we do want to do antigen testing. We need to do it ourselves on campus. No, maybe we'll partner with Unity Health. So we're definitely talking about it, but just what's acceptable and what the results mean and what the preferred processes and frequency are is still changing weekly. So we don't have definite answers. The contact tracing piece, the Arkansas Department of Health has really gotten after that, and especially those who are working in our local healthcare facilities are seeing very good contact tracing through the Department of Health. So at this point, I think they would head that up, but we would try to supplement that as needed. But the testing piece, we're still not sure how much or exactly which type of test we'll be able to use, and whether we'll be doing that on campus or utilizing a local facility.
One of the things we've talked about is giving the students specific instructions for the 2 weeks before they come to campus. And potentially there could be testing involved before they come and then as they arrive. I think it's becoming clearer to me that we will be able to do testing. It's just a question of, as Dr. Hickson Wallace said, exactly what that looks like. But the information they're sharing looks very promising for us to have the capabilities to do a testing protocol.
And a question that just came up is related to having students stay out of class if they're sick. If we require them to go to health services, wouldn't that cause more spread potentially rather than sheltering in place? Can they just call the health services office and get an excuse? And so again, I think those procedures are things that we will be looking into.
We need to look at that.
There's a question, how often will the staff be cleaning, sanitizing the classrooms? Will that be between the classes? Will it be in the evenings? Again, I know Tammy Hall is working closely with Airmark Services to come up with those protocols to be compliant with the guidelines that are in place at the time. And how will we make the necessary culture changes take root, such as always wearing masks?
I think that's where faculty have to hold students accountable and have to set the right example. We can't have students sitting in your class not wearing a mask if it's required. So that the ball's going to stop with us.
And I received a question about the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, related to do faculty need to plan for that to be in an online, like the traditional online format, or could it be something more like what they decided to do? Some faculty decided to do after spring break this year was basically meeting in real time or having videos posted. So, traditional online format versus freedom to do it whichever way you'd want to. And I think related to that is the idea that we may very well have much more of the semester online than just the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. So whatever we're planning for, please make those plans for much more than those 2 weeks.
I say freedom. That was the right word. I think the faculty member can decide how they're going to organize their class and make this work, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous or moving a project to that time, or use that time to accomplish what you need to accomplish to make the semester a successful class. We don't want to micromanage, for sure. Well, we're out of time. I know you might have questions or comments that have come up, so feel free to share those. You can email those to me or Dr. Hickson Wallace or Dr. Stile. I do plan to have another meeting in a couple of weeks and update you on where we're at and continue to get input. This has been very helpful to me. It's been affirming. A lot of the things that we've already talked about came up, but also some new things have come up and some new questions that we need to ask. So I really appreciate you participating and providing input. This year is going to be, it's going to be so important for us to have planned well this year to help our students be successful. And we're going to have, I think, quite a few students in unusual circumstances that we're going to need to try to accommodate. I think we need to plan to have some of our superstar students say, I can't come in the fall. Is there any way I can take my classes without coming? We need to be thinking about those things because we don't want to lose those students. And it is a really unusual time, and students are finding themselves in some strange circumstances. So if we can be as flexible as possible, that's going to be helpful to our students and helpful to us. Thank you so much. We're asking so much of everyone through this. And I want to finish with this note just to make you think about something. We had the Faculty Appreciation Day here a little while back, and that actually had popped up when I was in a meeting with Jana Rucker, who was expressing how much she appreciated the faculty and how they've stepped up and all of that, and what can we do to show appreciation. And I mentioned to her, I appreciate so much the admissions staff. If you want to talk about someone whose world got turned upside down, who's still trying to do their job and get our students here for the fall, the admissions staff has completely had to change how they think about recruiting and how they connect to students. And so if you can find some small way to reach out to someone on the admissions staff, I would love to share some love with them. They haven't been able to go on the road and face-to-face, and that's an important part of getting our students to come to Harding. And they've done a great job, and they are working really hard, longer hours probably than they used to. So everybody at Harding is stepping up, and so show some love to the admissions staff as well. Thank you guys so much. I'll send out an invite in a couple of weeks for another meeting, and this is recorded, so you can mention that to your colleagues. And also, if you can think of colleagues who might have some input, point them to that and have them send us an email. Hope you have a good afternoon and you can stay dry. Take care. Bye-bye.